special investment decisions. Examine the consequences of the interest rate affected by the central bank being only the short-term interest rate in the ISLM model with an expansionary monetary policy. So let's think about what this might mean. Only short-term interest rates being affected when we derive the IS. So we have our goods market equilibrium. Let me start with see the function of many things, but now we want to look at it as a function also of interest rates. It's a z at I0. And to derive the S equation, we'll map this down to interest rates. This interest rate here, I0. Some Y's. Now, we want to lower the interest rate. So let's say I1. And if we lower the interest rate, right, this is going to boost investment. Right? Lower the interest rate, it's cheaper to finance new factories. Right? The measuring stick, the yardstick for projects has been lowered, so we're going to engage in more of our projects. Okay? So we get then for our lowered interest rate than this point. If we connect these two, this will give us IY. This is how we get to the IS curve. Okay? So what happens if, right, for investment decisions, longer-term interest rates are more decisive, but monetary policy only affects shorter interest rates? Okay? Well, this means that although investment might go up, although investment might go up now with a decrease in the interest rate, it's not all the interest rates. The longer term interest rate might not have been affected, so investment won't go up by as much. That's all we're saying here. So what we're saying here is that maybe this increase in investment is smaller EI when only short term goes up. This would be call this Z prime I1. So in this case, if it's only the short-term interest rates that are affected, the effect on output of this same decrease in interest rates is going to be smaller. Now when we connect these points, you see the consequence? It just makes the IS curve steeper. Okay. So now let's look at the ISLM model with an expansionary monetary policy. So, let's look at IS curve. Is simply steeper. I did this in one, or you did this in one? No, expansionary monetary policy shock. So it's going to shift the LM curve down, right, to the right. Under the standard IS, interest rate would go down to I. Under this alternative, the interest rate would go down even further. The output effect would be smaller. So now we can look at the money demand for the money market situation. We have Y1. And with our steeper, here we have output has gone up, but not as much. So wherever we chose this shift to the right of money demand to be with this increase in Y, it's going to be smaller. Right, the same increase in the money supply, so this has to intersect. Like that. So we see that the same increase in the money supply is going to lead to a larger decrease in interest rates, right, with a smaller increase in output if we have only the short-term interest rates being affected. So in the okay, now let's look at
Bây giờ nguyên ấu liền nhiều. Hả? Nguyên ấu liền. Sâu thường.
okay, so now we want to look at this government spending multiplier. C plus I plus G0. Let's shift this up. C1 plus now if we have the direct effect, then we have this multiplier, right? The steps that get us up into our total shift upward. Then we stand here, suppose y1. Nope. Right, this is the size of the multiplier that we would have if interest rates stayed constant at I0. Right, but interest rates aren't going to stay constant when we have the shift out in the IS curve, right? Shift. Interest rates won't stay constant, okay? But instead we'll move up here with the increase in interest rates. Right, this is Z prime interest rate 1. This is 3. Zero. C1 prime I1 plus G1. So in terms of the question, we first have our original multiplier. Then with interest rate adjustment. Now, what would be the case if we had expectations regarding interest rates taken into account so that we don't have all long-term interest rates also being moved up? Right? Maybe if our IS curve is steeper,
Dạ. Nó có 4 mà chị còn trang nữa.
holding the interest rate constant at first is going to give us the same shift. But this might lead good. perhaps to a somewhat larger multiplier, so with expectations. And then if we have our long-term adjustment, where we know then, long run with price adjustment. The multiplier disappears completely. Right, so what we see here is that it's not so clear what the effect of a government spending increase is on output. Right? It could be much larger than one, original multiplier. Right? Remember if we had a very low marginal propensity to, a very high marginal propensity to consume. Right, C1 was like 0.9, and get a multiplier of 10. Right? So the effect on output will be 10 times the original government expenditure increase. Interest rate adjustment might lower that, right, depending on how right, the IS curve might be steeper if we have a that effect might be a little bit larger, a little bit smaller. Or if we have the full adjustment with prices, what we expect certainly to happen in the long run, then there might be no effect in output whatsoever. In which case the multiplier doesn't just fall down perhaps to 1, but falls then all the way down to 0. And so maybe understanding how the interest rate adjusts and investment adjusts to interest rates, right? How expectations react and how we move to the long run is probably an important thing to figure out. Yeah? Okay.
Sầu riêng sầu riêng cái cục này là sao luôn mà không có nghe buồn bã chất bay
Okay, but in many economies, like of course the Vietnamese economy, is an open economy. What happens when the effects of imports and exports is non-negligible? What are the effects of the exchange rate? Right, how can we look at current account deficits? We have more exports and imports. Like, how can we find equilibrium in the goods market and financial markets? I.e., what's the ISLM model in an open economy? To Mundell Fleming. And then we can start thinking about now a different monetary policy option that we have. Instead of controlling the money supply, or instead of controlling the nominal interest rate, the central bank could control the exchange rate. And what are the effects of a fixed exchange rate? Right, so the extension, the isolated model of the open economy. What determines the exchange rate? How does the exchange rate and trade influence the goods market? And how can economic policy influence the exchange rate? All right, so let's look at the IAS curve. So we're going to have our demand function, right, but now we have to add in imports and exports. All right, but we want to keep in mind that there might be something, we have a little bit adjustment here. Right? The demand for domestic goods is not equal to the domestic demand for goods. Right? Why? Now, when we pay imports, right, let's say you want to import some German sausage. Huh? Right? Do you call up your friend in Frankfurt, the business, and say, send me some German sausage, I'm going to send you some dong? No. Say you're going to send me some sausage, and I'm going to, and he tells you, well, sausages cost 10 euros per kilogram. Oh, that's right. We buy the products abroad, we have to pay the currency abroad. So we need to take into account the price abroad, convert it to the price here, and deal with the exchange rate. Right, so if we want to measure here in nominal terms, in terms of money, in terms of drawing what our demand is, right, we take our price level times the total demand for goods. Right, think of like the basket we had yesterday times the price in dong for the basket. This gives us the total nominal demand, right, is equal to how many baskets of the good are bought by consumers times the price. The price of the basket times how many are bought by investors, right, to build new factories and office buildings. Price times the government. Right, exporters buy the basket and sell that. Plus the price of the import goods. But remember, we have to buy the sausage in Germany. We have to pay euros. Right? But we don't care about the euro price. I want to know how many dongs that is. Times imports. And now we have something that's going to, whenever you deal with an open economy model, that's always difficult to think about, or it's easy to get confused. What is the exchange rate. So what's the exchange rate? Does anyone know the exchange rate between the dong and the euro? Yeah.
Euro.
Yes. Around
30.
31,000 for Vietnam dong for euro.
Okay, so one way to write it would be 21,000. I think it's 30,000. 30,000, right?
31 and
31,000. Yeah, 31,000. Okay. There's a different way, right? So that's how many right? Vietnamese dong per euro. Well, how many euros do you get per dong? That's also the exchange rate.
Yeah.
So this number is like 31,000. And this number, can you calculate that for me?
0.40
6.
and then 32.
32. It's kind of important to choose the right one and be consistent. Right? If you start doing the math, if you multiply by 31,000 or by 0.00032 and you're using the wrong one, you're probably going to get very different results. Right? So which is the right one? There is no right one. It's the same object from two different perspectives. What's the exchange rate? So you have to look, really, every textbook, every paper that has an exchange is going to define it, whether they talk about in German they call it the Mengenkonzept or the Preiskonzept, like the quantity perspective or the price perspective. So we could look at the exchange rate. If we define it like this, so this is the price of baud is in terms of just the quantities equals euros. And if I want P star divided by E to be in Vietnamese dong, then right? We're defining the exchange rate in this way. All right, so we want to know how much of the foreign currency we get for our currency. Right, so you can divide through by E. So let's say the price of sausage I said was 10 euros per kilogram. If you divide 10 through by 0.00032, you're going to get then obviously the same number that you'd get when you multiply 10 with 31,000. So this is the perspective, right, that the textbook that I followed chooses for the nominal interest rate. Sorry, for the nominal exchange rate. Exchange rates in general. So we can call this, just in terms of the units, right, is, so I should put this in parentheses. Is the units of the foreign currency times the units of the home currency. Okay, and now if we want to get the real demand, our demand for domestic demand for goods, we divide through by our price level. We just want to know the number of baskets that we've bought. And we get this term here. And if we look in terms of the units, P star over P E, we have then here, we call this then. So we have to make a choice here. So now when we're doing open economy, you're going to make me an honorary Vietnamese, okay? So when I talk about our currency, I'm talking about the dong. Yeah? So for open economies, please let me be honorary Vietnamese, and then we'll do everything from the Vietnamese perspective. That's important to say, otherwise we'll get confused. If I was German, I could then compare it to the US dollar, but since I'm American, and I'll get confused if I do that, and you're even. Just call me, yeah. And so what is the price?
Professor, so
Yeah.
you mean the nominal exchange rate is the euro over VND?
Yeah. So the nominal exchange rate, when we talk about exchange rate, is how much of the foreign currency do we get for our foreign currency? So how many euros do we get per dong? Right, that's the exchange rate. We're used to. Sometimes even here, you might be more used to using this exchange rate, right? It's the same object,
Yeah.
just the inverse, right? And
But I mean, it's quite confused here because the last cost in the international macroeconomics.
to use that perspective,
Yes.
oh no! So I think,
So like when I see the slide,
yeah, so, it's, that's actually also, it's unfortunate, it's good, maybe it's good practice, because any textbook you open, any paper that you open, anytime you open a newspaper, right, it could be done in either one of these two ways, and we'll see later what's more natural is to talk about appreciation and depreciation of our currency. And that's kind of why I prefer this one. If I say the dong has appreciated, what that means is that the value of the dong has gone up, which would mean, and in this exchange rate, the exchange rate would go up. Yeah? So the exchange rate and the term appreciation move in the same direction. Here, it's then moving the opposite direction. So an appreciation means the exchange rate goes down. I don't know, maybe that's kind of confusing. We talk about depreciation then, that would mean the exchange rate goes up, right? Here, appreciation means we get more euros for our dong. The dong has become more valuable. So we're going to say the exchange rate goes up. Right? And there's a lot, so historically, we used to, it's gone back and forth in the literature, and it's just confused at this point in time. So I think it's useful. I don't know if the other international, who taught international macro?
Professor Philip Hans.
Yeah, he also mentioned about this.
Okay.
He asked us to notice about the notation when we
Yeah.
talking about the exchange rate,
Yeah.
and always reminds us about be careful for this.
Okay.
Yeah, because two kind of notation, price and quantity. Yeah,
Further point. So the same thing I said. Okay, good. So,
that's
So-
not different, just different. The notation
yeah.
apply for different lectures. So
Yeah. So okay, well.
Đó, nhưng mà em đúng luôn tại thầy dạy
All right.
là-
So let's just slow yourself down, and it's important to always memorize the exchange rate. Okay. So,
thầy cũng nói là nó là hai khái niệm.
what does the price? We told us it was 10 euros per kilogram of sausage. Right? So we think of the price level. It's going to be how many euros we have to pay for the German basket of goods. So it would be euros per German goods basket. is the units here. That's why I'm putting in parentheses here, for the units. Right, so then we have for the, and that's also kind of why I like it's the price,
Yeah.
right? Or if we think of, no, it's the inverse of the price actually. Yeah, so that's what we're going to do. Right, okay, the price, the price here at home, let's give the price, the dong per Vietnamese goods basket times the exchange rate that we've written as this, and the units there are euros over VND.
Professor,
Yeah.
so this the demand for domestic goods?
No, it's the domestic demand for goods. Right, this is where we're buying, we're importing.
Ah,
Right, so it's our demand
okay.
for goods, because the demand for domestic goods,
Yes, sir.
That is minus
And then minus.
import.
well, wait, you're, the demand for domestic goods. No, you're right, sorry, so it's the demand for domestic goods, it's the
Thầy rớt,
domestic demand for goods,
thầy rớt môn này chắc luôn.
right, doesn't take into account that we,
Sao đậu là
Mày cứ vậy thầy quánh mày rớt bây giờ.
chị nghĩ giải chỉ mình rớt rồi đó.
Alright, maybe just write this down. Domestic demand for goods,
VND.
right, would be our consumption plus our investment plus government expenditures. Oh, here. Oh, this is what you mean. Yeah. Sorry. I was being slow.
Mày cứ
Yeah.
viết đi mày. Mệt quá.
Right? And then we have to adjust for the demand for domestic goods. Goods we also sell some goods abroad, but then we subtract the fact that we have these imports. We'll talk about this epsilon now. Okay, so here I'm just trying to figure out what the units are of this object here. So I can see that some of the units cancel out. Right? So this tells me
Em không chạy gì.
Here's on the roof. Who's basket? Basket. Who's basket?
Vietnamese goods. Well, the Germans look fast. Right, and this is, we're going to call this the inverse epsilon. So epsilon is going to measure German goods basket. Vietnamese goods basket. Yeah, it's a real exchange rate. It's giving us a measure of right, competitiveness. Right? How many of the German good baskets do we get for the Vietnamese good basket? If we think of the world, if we just had one good, right? I don't know, let's say the only thing that the world produced was rice. We just have rice. There's no sausage, right? No motorbikes, no nothing, just rice. The real exchange rate would be telling us, right, essentially how competitive we are. Right? If for one German basket of rice, we can get 2 baskets of Vietnamese rice, we're producing a lot more competitively. So if we have an appreciation in the nominal exchange rate here, that means E goes up. That means we get more euros for our dong. If we have a real appreciation, this means we get more German goods for our goods. And if we turn this around on its other hand, if we think of ourselves as an exporting nation, this is what we think of a decrease in competitiveness. To buy our goods, the Germans have to give up more of their goods. Oh, that means a real appreciation means that our goods have become relatively more expensive. No? So real appreciation might mean an increase in our ability to import. We'll see here. But it's going to have an effect on our exports, and the demand that comes from abroad for our goods.
So, Professor,
Yeah.
if we call the capital E is the nominal exchange rate, so the epsilon we can say that is the CBI based Greens exchange rate.
Yeah, it's the real exchange rate. Yeah. This is right, so if we hold the quantity that we import from abroad constant, if we have a real appreciation, right, this means in terms of our goods, our imports have become less expensive. No? Right, so it's measuring the price yeah, no, that's fine. Okay, if we look at the domestic demand, right, this is as before. In the last lecture, real exchange rate doesn't matter. But now we want to look at how objects depend on things like the real exchange rate and income. All right, so the first thing, our imports, let's look at how it depends on Y, our domestic income. As our income rises, right, our consumption of domestic goods increases, right, but we don't want to just buy more Vietnamese goods. We also want to buy more goods from abroad. When our income goes up, we want to buy more, a little bit more of everything. Yeah? So our imports from China, from Germany, right, etc., would go up. Income goes up, our consumption goes up, goods, not just Vietnamese goods, right, but Vietnamese and imported goods. All right. How about the real exchange rate? If that goes up, right, we have an appreciation, a real appreciation, which means in real terms, we get more goods from abroad in exchange for our goods. In other words, goods from abroad have become cheaper. Hey, cool. Huh? I can give up fewer of my production to get more of those goods that I wanted from abroad. Right? So instead of having to give up, 10 kilograms of rice for 1 kilogram of sausage, I only have to give up 5 kilograms of rice for a German sausage. I might get 2 German sausages now. Huh? So we think that imports depend positively on the real exchange rate. All right, how about exports? Well, they're going to depend positively on Y star, which is going to be income abroad. So when people abroad have higher income, they're going to demand more goods, both from their home country and from other countries, including ours. So if Germany has an increase in income, or the United States has an increase in income, or China has an increase in income, they're also going to buy more goods from Vietnam. Okay. And now the real exchange rate. Okay, this is the flip side. Right? If we have a real appreciation, we get more goods for each of our Vietnamese goods. The flip side is people abroad need to give up more of their goods for a single Vietnamese good. Our goods have become more expensive. Right? If we think of this also then as the currency, right? Our goods have become more expensive in foreign currency. So that's going to lead to a decrease in the demand for our goods, so a decrease in exports. All right, we can take our goods market picture from before and add in step-by-step imports measured in terms of Vietnamese goods. Right, that's also right, the reason why, another reason why it's useful to think of it like this. Right, so when we divide through here, we're now turning German goods, multiplying it by Vietnamese goods, dividing by German goods. So this dividing through by epsilon converts the German goods basket into the Vietnamese goods basket. So we're measuring everything in terms of our domestic goods basket, or our income. Right, so let's take our domestic demand from before, and we subtract the imports, right? But it's not just a shift down, right? It also decreases the slope. Right? Why? Because our imports also depend on income. And they depend positively on income, but they enter into the equation negatively. Right, so we think of D take the derivative, right, of ZD with respect to Y. Right, this gives me then CY plus YY. And now the derivative Z with respect to Y is equal to CY plus IY minus IMY divided by epsilon. Right? Or it's the same derivative of domestic demand minus this term here. Right? So we've lowered the slope, which is why it's flattened. The slope is lower. We have a flattened demand curve. Why? Because whereas before, as our income increased, we had to push all of this increased income into demanding more domestic goods. Right now, each additional unit of income is split between domestic goods and foreign goods. Right? So it's increasing the demand for domestic goods by less than it would in a closed economy. When we get wealthier, we're not just going to buy maybe a VinFast car, right? We might also buy a BYD car, right? It's not just going to stay here in Vietnam when we get higher income. We're also going to demand goods from abroad. So our old perspective with this dependency overstated the effect on domestic production of an increase in income. Because part of it we're going to funnel off to import goods. Okay. Now, we're going to add in exports. Exports depend on foreign income. Right? When income in Germany goes up, they demand more of our goods. When income in China goes up, they demand more of our goods. When our income goes up, this doesn't change China's demand for our goods or Germany's demand for our goods. So this is just a parallel shift up. So we can go step by step. First, subtract the imports, so it also flattens our curve. And now we do a shift upwards. And so what we find, the reason why I like to do this step by step, is that if we have a balanced trade, right, if we don't have a trade surplus or a trade deficit, if we have balanced trade so net exports are equal to 0, right, then our output level is exactly the same as it would have been before when we were just looking at domestic demand, right? These two things cancel out. Right? So Z is equal to ZD when we have balanced trade. Okay, but that's why we have this point of intersection here. Point of intersection of Z and our DD, right, is right at the point where we have balanced trade. But compared to our perspective yesterday, right, our demand curve is now flatter. Right? And so if our output of our income goes up, right, our demand for domestic goods is going to go up, but not by as much as before. Right? What are we going to do? We're going to buy, right, maybe a VinFast car and a BYD car. Oh, we had balanced trade before now, and now the only thing we've changed in our trade is that we're now demanding more Chinese goods. So if our trade was balanced before, now we have a deficit. We've not changed Chinese income. The only thing we've changed is our income. Now we're buying more Chinese goods than we were before. So if before trade was balanced, now we have a deficit. And the other way around, if our income gets decreased, we're going to decrease our demand for goods, right? We'll buy less rice from Vietnam, but we'll also reduce our rice imports from, do you import rice from anywhere? No, Vietnam's got the best rice, right? But what if you want like the basmati rice? Like, that's maybe you import some basmati rice from like India and
Maybe some from Thailand. Yeah.
Maybe. So let's pretend we import rice, right? If our income goes down, we're going to reduce our purchases of Vietnamese rice, but also our imports. Right? So before our trade was balanced, now we're just reducing our imports, holding everything else, specifically exports, constant. So now we have a trade surplus. Right, so this
Anh nhắc cái nào?
ZZ includes our net exports, right? We have the parallel shift with then the change of AA, and then it's not just parallel, it's having the exports to AA shifts that up, right? But in total we have now a flatter curve than we did before. And before we think about equilibrium, before we go, my mind goes flat, let's take our lunch break. So we'll come back in an hour and finish going through our opening.